Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
It is amazing to me that someone who is so smart as an attorney, and he is just an amazing guy, I have to tell you that, and yet he gets on the radio, and he could be speaking at the largest crowd anywhere, or he could be speaking as he does now. He calls in from his home. Sometimes he comes to the studio when I'm lucky, but he is really very, very smart and very articulate. And so we're going to get him to start telling us about some important issues, one of which is the spouse going into a nursing home and why estate plans of both spouses need review. Very important topic. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning, and I've got a surprise. I'm neither at home or in the studio. I've been in the office for the last hour.
Really?
Yeah, you know, when I have a basic philosophy, which is many lawyers get a bad reputation because they're very quick to take in the work and not so quick to get it out. So when I take in work, I get it done. So I'm in the office this morning doing dictation and getting things moved off my desk so other people will be complaining about how much work they have in the office.
All right. Well, you're very disciplined. That's what I think makes you an incredible lawyer. You are someone, you just do it. You're supposed to do it, and you are so friendly. You have a lot of attributes. Does your wife know that?
My wife is my greatest attribute.
That's great. I know Debbie is really a peach anyway.
So the answer is, it is a mutual admiration society in our marriage.
I know it is. Yeah, she's a blessing. She's sweet. She's smart. And it's so nice. And the other thing is I was with somebody else, and they said something about you. They were so thrilled with and I can't remember who that is at this moment. And they said, and now he has his son with him. I said, yes, I know that. Oh, his son's terrific. So your reputation now is moving along.
Well, I always told people the law firm is the reason we have a law firm is you're not just hiring me. And then my business plan was the firm would outlast me. Now, not only will the firm outlast me, which was always my plan, but it's generational. So that's sort of nice. It works. He's been raised with this as part of his family legacy, if you will. And he had choices. He could have done any number of things. I didn't push at all. In fact, so much so that when he wanted to go to law school, rather than hand it to him, I made him take student loans for the entire thing. I didn't pay for anything, and I'm not just talking tuition. He had to be committed to want it and to be, and then after he graduated, that he wanted to be here. And I didn't slop him up with a big salary. I wanted him to know that this is what he wanted and that there were other options. And he's terrific, and he's great. The clients love him. He's smart as a whip, and he's got a quality about him that says, I'm glad he inherited his mother's genes.
You're great. Well, let's talk about, I know you're not doing seminars right now, too. That someone else asked me about that.
We're going to do them in April. We just don't have the dates. So for your listeners who are interested in our seminars, we're scheduling them in the first week in April. We just haven't gotten commitments from the hotels in Port St. Lucie, Boynton Beach, and Palm Beach Gardens. So they should stay tuned to our website because those dates are going to be firmed up in the next few days, and they will be on the website, which is KARPLAW, KARPLAW.com.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so now let's get down to your topic, because you do such important articles in Boomer Times every month. But this was interesting. It's people, when they lose a spouse or something happens, they just don't tend to want to go back into anything. In fact, I would just tell you something. Someone I know just lost her husband. And so that was the first thing I said. Oh, she said, we took care of everything. I said, no. I said, I go to Joe KARP, and we had taken care of everything, but no, when I got there, he had to make certain changes. So don't be so smart about that.
And sometimes, by the way, just as a separate, and I'll give you just a little vignette, sometimes there are things that people think they can take care of them themselves, and they do, but it becomes a bad decision. I'll give you one example. This is a real-life case. A gentleman came in to me with his daughter and his financial planner. His wife had died 4 months before. He was 93. His daughter, he had 2 daughters, but one was with him. She was 60. The wife had been a New York City school teacher, and she had been somewhat younger than him, although it was a long-term marriage, and she had a significantly large 403B, which is like a 401k or an IRA for teachers. And she had like $400,000 left in it, and he had about $1.5 million. Well, when she died, he proudly told me at the meeting that he had already taken care of, and his financial planner, who also just probably didn't think the way I think. He knew it when the light went off when I said it, but he had taken care of the 403B beneficiary designation to himself and rolled it over to an IRA for himself. His daughters had been the contingent beneficiary if he had predeceased his wife. And he said, well, I don't need help with that. And then I explained to him and his financial planner it was too late, and I wasn't doing it to rub it in. I was doing it more to educate his financial planner. And this is why you should see the lawyer before you do some stuff that you think is easy. He didn't need that $400,000. He was the first to concede that. He didn't need that money. He had $2 million in his home, and he's 93. Well, when you're 93 and you're the spouse, you get that IRA or 401k as a rollover. You have to pull it out on your actuarial lifespan. His actuarial lifespan was less than 10 years, which meant, and that meant he had to pull out $40,000 the first year. He was going to have to pull out 1/9 the next year, and he was going to be dissipating that IRA that he didn't need, adding to his estate and also dissipating it. And he had the right to do something called a disclaimer. The disclaimer would have said, as to that IRA or any portion of it, treat me as if I had predeceased my wife. And then it would have gone to the daughters, who had a 25-year life expectancy, approximately. So instead of pulling out 10%, they would have had to pull out 1/25 or 4%. So those IRAs could have grown in their name tax deferred. He didn't need the money, and it would have been economically beneficial to the family to do it that way. So I always tell people, even though you think you can handle it, and you're doing it correctly in terms of following the rules that are set up, you're really not necessarily doing what you should be doing, and you need to get some advice as to what you should be doing. So we always warn people that as painful as it is, if you basically went ahead and did an estate plan, that's sort of like the family business plan. And then you should go to the family business lawyer, and I don't mean your commercial lawyer or the guy who set up your corporation, but the family business is the estate and the trust and stuff like that, and say, what should I do now? And not assume that even though you can do something, you should. And
that's good advice.
It can make a difference. And I understand when somebody dies, usually there's been a dying process. We don't have a lot of people who die where we hear the expression you haven't heard in 40 years, so-and-so died yesterday, he was never sick a day in his life, right? And remember that expression? We never hear that anymore.
No.
So the answer is you should see what you should be doing and whether it's appropriate. In fact, our clients, we tell them, if your loved one is dying, you may want to come in here and review your estate plans now, even if your spouse can't come in, or even if your parent can't come in and you're the child who's going to be taking over, just to make sure the ducks are in a row. Remember, you're going to have to find all of that out and straighten it out after somebody dies. You may facilitate cleaning up things that didn't get wrapped in a bow nicely and clean it up before the person dies to avoid unnecessary post-mortem expenses.
Mm. Yep, it's see, I think what happens too is when someone passes away, the person is in such shock they don't do much of anything. Yes, they have to get the death certificates and all that, but that's the problem, that they need someone that pushes them and says, "Okay, you better go to the lawyer, get all these things taken care of." And of course, you being who you are, you of course know that the person's passed away, and I'm sure you send a lovely letter and you probably contact them. But let's forget you for a moment. Other people who don't have someone like a Joe KARP, it gets a little bit scary and hairy.
And the other thing they do is just the opposite. They have lived through their spouse's sickness and dying process and have felt totally helpless throughout it all. And then, when their spouse dies, they are, besides being at a loss and emotionally struck, they feel like they want to do something. So they do some of the things on their own before seeking appropriate advice because it seems obvious. Oh, I'm the beneficiary of the IRA. I'll get that. I can finally do something. I couldn't do anything. His mind was, this client, I couldn't do anything while my wife was dying, but now that she's gone, I can do things. I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to take care of that. And they seem very easy, not lawyer stuff. And that sometimes can be blown. So people are better off doing it and having a sense of getting direction to make sure they're doing the right things. So, yes, that's true.
So, Joe, it's fun. You look back. You've been practicing a long time, elder law. What really would you say the major changes that people have to do today they didn't do years and years ago? I know it's a big question to ask you, just throw it at you, but...
The big thing they didn't do, first of all, years and years ago, 25 years ago, if I had a 70-year-old client come into my office, they really didn't think anything about long-term care. They figured, well, how much more time do I have? They were worried about just avoiding probate and getting things passed easily. Now, clients who come into my office who are 70, 80, 90 are starting to realize that they don't have to plan to die as much as they have to plan to live, and recognize that long-term care is an issue, that the cost of that care can be prohibitive, that they have more longevity than they ever anticipated, and now they got to start to deal with, what do I do if I live? When they came in 25 years ago, all they wanted to do is talk about what they did when they died. And now they're starting to realize, 25 years ago, just think about it, and your listeners should. Independent living, assisted living was not part of the regular vocabulary as part of the transitional stage people would take. People thought, well, once I can't live at home, I'm going to end up in a nursing home. They never had that transitional state in mind, right?
Yep.
So it's dealing with those issues and planning for that and planning for the high cost of care. I mean, I had a lady in yesterday, and I met with her first. She wanted to meet with her daughters. One daughter was out of state and was on speakerphone. The other daughter, who lived out of state and had been in town, came in after it was clear that everything was okay, everything was above board, there were no secrets, the daughters knew everything, and that was the whole family. And they sat down and had a discussion, and although she didn't like to admit it, she recognized that she's still sharp. She's got it. She understands. But she also knew that there are two things that she had to be realistic about. One, her husband died a little over a year ago, and that her sister went through something like this, and she's heard of friends and things like that, where being alone, they ultimately got manipulated out of their money by people who appeared to be well-intentioned, who appeared to be caring. Usually it's a person that they develop a trusting relationship with. And she was concerned that she would be somewhat vulnerable in the future if that happened. I mean, the stereotypical phone call is the daughters live out of state. They call up mom and say, "Mom, what's going on? Blah blah blah. Where's your home health person, or what's going on?" And she says either the home health person or this friend that I met just went to Publix for me. "Oh, that's very nice. How's she going to pay for your groceries?" "Well, I gave her my credit card."
Oh, my.
They don't look at Publix. They just take the credit card.
Mm.
And the daughter says, that's risky. You don't know what she's going to do. In fact, you don't see well. So you told me she writes out the checks for you to pay your bills. She says, "Okay, you owe American Express X dollars, and you just sign the checks." That's okay. She's honest and trustworthy.
Right.
And let us assume for the minute that person very well may be. But then again, that person may be a little interested in themselves, even if they're not stealing. So the mother comes, the person comes back from the grocery, delivers the groceries. "Here's your charge card back," and she says, "Thank you. My daughter just called, and she was so worried that you had the credit card. I told her she was crazy. I trust you with everything."
Mm.
And the friend says, "Your daughter hasn't been here in 6 months. It seems every time you talk to her, all she's interested in is your money. She's not interested in your well-being. I take you to the doctors. I care about you.
Mm.
It seems every time you talk to her, all she cares about is the money." And that starts the wheels.
Right.
And that's when the power of attorney gets changed to the friend or the caregiver. And that's when estate plans get changed. And and she said, we had that conversation, and she said, this is what happened to her sister with a neighbor and the neighbor's family. Very nice people. But all of a sudden, they had the sister's husband died. The sister had no children. She had the two nieces, and my client is the sister. And they weren't there. They had concerns. They'd call up and say, "What's new?" They didn't even make too much inquiry of money. Just, "How you doing? You need any help?" Blah, blah, blah. But they don't really care about you. They're just waiting around for the money. And there had been litigation after they realized that the neighbor had taken over, and they had to get a guardianship in Pennsylvania over the sister. Then I started talking when we were past that, and I said, we do what I call predator protection trusts, where the money is held as your kids as trustees with no Medicaid planning, just taking you out of control of your money so you don't get manipulated out of it. and just leave a decent amount of money in a bank account with people you trust that you can pull the money out. Then we started talking about Medicaid, and she, again, was concerned because her mother had dementia and gotten Alzheimer's before it was fashionable to know the name. They just thought she was senile, you know. And through that process, she decided, I mean, I advised, but she decided to do not only make the trust predator-proof, but a Medicaid asset protection trust, because her daughters, although they are successful, one's a successful educator and one's a successful journalist, which means one thing: they don't have a lot of money. Those are not people who get paid high in the spectrum, and they could not assist her if she ran out of money. And it wasn't about leaving them money. They'll have decent retirement plans. It was about them not having to dig in their pockets to support mom if she went into a nursing home. So she wanted to do Medicaid planning, and she has about $500,000, and she's going to do an irrevocable trust and put $400,000 in it. She's going to keep $100,000 out so she has a sense of comfort, and it's structured in a way that she'll get all of the income. There'll be a way to get the principal to her if it's ever needed, but after 5 years, that money would be protected from Medicaid. And it's also protected from predators. And she came to that conclusion after assessing reality. And that's an important thing to do.
Well, you really, I'm just going to say something. You use the word predator. That I haven't heard that, but you see a lot of that, don't you?
Oh, sure. That's when they're talking about financial elder abuse, it's predatory. Isn't it?
Yeah, it really is, and it's frightening. And and the interesting thing, and of course, I've had a friend who had a lot of when her husband died, a lot of the family came after the estate, which was horrible, and something new that I'd never heard. A hospice will. That was something different, wasn't it? Maybe, would you explain what that is to people?
I'm not sure what you mean by a hospice will.
They called it a hospice will. The particular lawyer said that there already was a will and a trust, and the sons came down, and they decided that they were helping their father, and whom the father didn't really care about, the sons particularly. He didn't really like them, but anyway, they came down because they were physicians themselves, and they started treating him, and they went to another lawyer and had another will, and somehow had...
While he was dying, they do another will. Yeah,
yes.
And those
hospice wills,
lawsuits, and that's why I'm setting these things up irrevocably.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, when you lose your spouse, if you are somebody who's somewhat alone and reclusive, not social, and you become infirm, you become dependent maybe upon one person. Frequently, it's fine. It's the good kid or kids. But there's vulnerability, and money is, if not the root of all evil, it certainly can bring out evil in people who might not otherwise be evil.
Yeah.
So it's something to be looked after.
Well, you had done that with my mother. You saw there could be a problem with my brother, and you did set it up that way, and it really paid off. That there was a will that couldn't be changed, and I thought that was fabulous.
It was a trust. We did it.
Right,
as long as you're bringing it up, we did a trust with your mother.
Right.
That was irrevocable.
That's right.
Except we allowed it to be changed if not her children wanted it changed, but if her sisters agreed to the change.
Yeah.
So we had neutral non-beneficiaries who could agree to it so that she wouldn't be manipulated by anybody. And it was even-handed enough that no matter whether it was you or your brother, had no ability to alter her estate plan.
Right.
So it was very even-handed.
Yes.
It didn't even... The concern was your brother, but the
And he did come after it, as a
restrictions
matter of
were
fact,
even.
which is interesting. So, but he couldn't do anything. I loved it. Oh, you did such a good job for us.
I'll tell you what I just did for somebody that's interesting, and then I should get off. I had a client who came in. He's married, only about 6 years, but a solid marriage. This is a lady he knew from church, etc. His wife, after 45 years, had died. He had been a widower for a while, married this lady. Perfect relationship, good relationship. And he's in his mid-60s and has been diagnosed with dementia with early onset Alzheimer's. He has seen the effects of that disease with other people he knew and read enough and got educated enough that the first thing we did was we set up a trust for him, for her, and he moved all of the money to the trust. And the trust is set up for their benefit, and this has nothing to do with Medicaid. And when she dies, if he's still alive, the money is held by trusted people for his benefit. And there's a paper trail in case there's ever a divorce or something that was his money that went in there too. But he also had $1 million IRA. And she had power of attorney. But the problem is, a power of attorney doesn't give up your control. It merely gives somebody else additional control. And he said, I'm scared that I might do something crazy with my IRA money, and my wife can't stop me. It's not in her control, and we can't put it in the trust while he's alive because that would be a taxable event. So we did a voluntary guardianship through the court, where the court found him legally competent, but appropriate to divest himself of control of that account.
And so, Joe, we go on, and we thank you so much. We always run out of time, but it's you're such an interesting interviewee, and thank you.
By the way, the judge had never heard of it, and the judge loved it.
Good for you. Thanks, Joe. We'll talk to you next month.
Look on my website for the schedule in April. Bye-bye.
Bye.